Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Gerber Gear Sedulo. First off though, before I go any further, I want to thank Gerber for sending this guy along. One of my contacts at Gerber reached out and said, "Hey Nick, you want to check out the Sedulo? I think you're going to like this one." I said, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They know that well. But they still sent it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison real quick. First off, here it is against the usual suspects. The Ontario Rat number 2. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica in well, just regular. And here it is against the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, or the PM2. And so what we see here is that it is a pretty reasonably sized sort of knife. Here it is against a just realized a good point of comparison for this guy would actually be the Benchmade Bug Out, which is another sliding lock style knife here, the axis lock on the Benchmade. And so what we see here is that they are relatively similar on this dimension, a little bit different on this dimension. The Sedulo is a markedly thicker knife, but there you go, and also a heavier one too. And so there is your size comparison. And then finally, actually, I should put it up against the Gerber Gear Fastball. This is the one that I assembled actually at their factory. So, yeah, cool. So anyways, there is that. Then finally, this is a US-made Gerber. You know, there is increasingly a very strong distinction between Gerber Gear's Chinese-made knives and their US-made ones. And this is not necessarily I'm not just being nationalist here. It's just the case that, you know, hey, look, they're putting a little bit more effort in, it feels like, in their USA-made models. And so that is definitely a factor, and it's something you want to keep in mind, that there are very much two different lines at Gerber, and that can actually make a major difference. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife. Start with on the good side, one thing that's going to be interesting to a lot of people. Every time I post a review these days of a Chinese knife, I get somebody, "Oh my God, it's Chinese, I'm out." Whatever, you're welcome to your socio-political views, but this is an American-made knife, and it's from a company that a lot of people don't even think make American-made knives anymore, right? It's $105, and it's actually pretty well built, right? You're definitely paying a price here for US-made. If I were to buy a knife that's identical to this from another country, you could probably do it a little bit cheaper. But the thing is, for the folks to whom that is really important, this is going to be an interesting option, and in fact, that's probably one of this knife's better features, so to speak, and one of the things that distinguishes it a little bit more. So there is that. Next thing, this is a fully ambidextrous knife. As is the case with any of these sliding axis style bar locks, like this guy, it is fully ambi because there are thumb studs on both sides. There is access to the lock on both sides, and there is the pocket clip on both sides. And so that makes this a knife that a lefty will have an identical experience with relative to a righty, with exactly one exception we'll talk about a little bit later. But this is a fully ambi knife. I appreciate that very much. Next thing, this has full liners. I would really recommend that you watch the disassembly video of this knife because I don't want to take the whole thing apart right now because it's a little bit of a pain in the... Well, actually, it's not that hard. But at the same time, you know, you'll get a better sense of what I'm talking about there. But this knife has a full liner that goes all the way from the pivot back to this little standoff here. This is a full-lined knife, and as a result, the knife ends up feeling very stiff and very durable. And even though the handle itself is some variety of a plastic or another, it looks maybe injection molded based on these little marks in the back here, the knife itself is very stiff, is very well done. And so I would say the full liner thing is definitely a nice detail. And the texture work on this, by the way, is very nice too. If we take a look at this, yeah, this is good. I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see sort of the details of it, but yeah, this looks pretty nice, and it actually does have a little bit of prominence to it, and it feels pretty good. It's not, oh my God, tearing your hand apart, but at the same time, it gives you a lot of gription. Coupled with this area of jimping up here, as well as this one down here, this just knife, it's not going anywhere in your hand, and I appreciate that very much. I think the texturing is very well done. One interesting piece about the texture work, though, is this right here. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to zoom in back again for you. If we look underneath the clip here, we see an area where there is no texturing. They have made a pad basically for the clip to land on it. This is huge. This is a design detail that matters. Because what that means, you know, very often you'll see companies who use heavy texturing and then just put the clip right down onto the texturing, and that just tears your pants apart, right? And that's great if... Anyways, you want your pants not torn apart on a general basis, right? And so this is a nice little detail there. Some jokes you don't make on YouTube. This is not necessarily a... This is a nice detail. And so I appreciate very much that they've done that. Next thing, the pivot on this guy is actually very interesting. Should I take this apart? Yeah, actually, I think I'm gonna. Like I said, you're gonna watch the disassembly video, but this is an easy part to show you off, right? If I pop the pivot through here, just use a little tool here, what I'll do is I'll show you the thing that actually really surprised me is the knife yeets itself apart onto the table, and that is this area right here. Come here, piece of cleaning cloth. My iPad is in front of my normal with my review. But what we have here is this little piece is not a separate piece of the blade, is not a washer on the blade. It is it is press fit into the blade. This doesn't rotate. It's not like a pivot bushing kind of thing. It looks like they have just put a section of brass, phosphor bronze, some material or another in there and had it stick out just enough that you have a washer there. And that makes this knife actually very, very easy to clean up and clean out. You know, in order to actually maintain the pivot on it, all you got to do is do exactly what I just did there. Pop it out, put a little bit of lubrication on things, and then stick the thing back in here. And then, would probably help if I had the pivot ready to go, right? And then you just press the pivot the rest of the way through as you run out of hands very rapidly. And there we go. We have got this knife put back together. There are no washers to get lost. There are no washers to have to slide in there. This is a very field serviceable knife as a result. And I kind of appreciate that. I think that works out very well. And I've over-tightened the pivot, but that's okay. Oh, damn it, I just did that whole thing on ultra zoom. I'm sorry about that, people. Hopefully things were at least slightly visible. Oof. Anyways, I digress. This is just a nice little detail, and it's something that's unusual. It's not something I expected to see out of Gerber. They've historically not been pushing the hardcore innovation, and that's nice to see. I don't know that it's going to be in the grand scheme of things, is that going to change the world of pivots? I don't know. I don't think so. But at the same time, it's cool to see it. It's nice to see them trying something new and interesting and different. And the action that results from it is quite good, by the way. This guy opens, closes, absolutely no problem. I like that very much. Next thing, blade on this is S30V, which is an absolutely fine steel. It is a sharpening choil. Well, there is a sharpening choil on it that works quite well. A very nice plunge grind to it. You can see here, nice sharp corner there. And even comes down to a reasonably thin edge. That was one of the major problems they had with the fastball. This guy comes down to a nice, reasonably thin edge. I appreciate the blade very much. Then finally, on the good side, Gerber is now offering a customizer. This is a great idea. This is, and for those of you unfamiliar, basically it's a website you go to through Gerber, and you pay a little bit more for the knife, but you're allowed to choose what color handle you want, what color blade do you want. You want a laser or pattern onto the blade. What do you want to... And you choose a bunch of different options. It's not quite as feature complete as other customizers, namely Benchmade is a little bit more fancy, right? But you can choose all of the relevant elements and come up with a knife that is uniquely your own for not too much more money than buying one of these guys retail. That is a brilliant idea, and in my mind, it beats the pants out of all of the various, oh, well, we're making a sprint run, so if you want the red scales, you gotta buy it from, eCutloman.com or whatever. I don't know. Nonetheless, it's a thing. I appreciate very much that they're doing that and that this is a part of that detail. Great idea. So, to me at least, on the good side, it's got the customizer, the blade is great, the action's great, it has that weird, interesting pivot mechanism in there. Well, mechanism, it's a pressed brass thing, whatever, it's got the thing. The texture work is good, full line is fully ambi, and a pretty well-built American-made knife for $105. On the great side to me, though, the thing that jumps out at me, although I could very easily put, any number of those things in great, the effort is what's jumping out at me. Gerber is a brand, and I've made no bones, and they've made no bones of the fact that they've historically not necessarily put in all that much in the way of effort. It's kind of been a neglected brand for a while, it feels like. But this is Gerber, and as was the fastball, but this even more so feels like Gerber is trying very, very hard. They are doing innovative things. They're trying some things that are a little bit different. They are putting in all of the effort. They're making all of the details here. They are doing the customizer. They are really showing via this knife, hey, we're coming back, damn it. We are on our way. We are doing interesting things. And you know what? I see it. I hear you. And that is great. I love seeing Gerber putting in this kind of effort because that ends up making something an actually compelling option for folks in the knife community. And the more great companies we have working in the knife community, that's a beautiful thing, right? So I appreciate very much the effort that we're seeing here. On the bad side, one of the things that immediately came up when I posted this guy on Instagram is that it is not a particularly unique looking knife. Coupled with this sliding bar style lock, it does have a feeling of similarity, even if there's not one particular knife where it's like, oh yeah, it looks a lot like that one, right? It's not inherently bad, and it's a good shape. It's good, it's functional, it works, but it's not a standout design particularly. It's not something that jumps out at you as like, oh, that's new, that's different. This feels like it could be based on a number of different things, even though I don't think in practice it comes close enough to be problematic for any of them. So it's not exactly breaking new ground. Yeah, that's the term, in terms of the functional and, the aesthetic design of it. Next thing, there is a little bit of roughness here, and this is maybe a little detail, but it is not something I particularly love. You can see here that there is some area where it looks like they broke this off of the mold of some variety. I bet that these handles are injection molded. And by the way, note the integral lanyard hole in the plastic here, which keeps you from having a big ugly lanyard hole in the side. But anyways, there is this little area here that they could have sanded off. They didn't. You can probably do that yourself, but there it is. Next thing, this guy has a little bit on, well, it's a little bit on the heavier side. It is a little on the heavier side. Put this on a scale, we see 3.58 ounces for, actually, it's not all that heavy, objectively speaking. It's coming in around an ounce an inch. The thing that's kind of a little weird with it is that there is no skeletonization of the liners in there, so it feels a little bit heavier, but I guess, really? Can that be right? 3.6 ounces for a little bit under 3.5 inches? It's not all that heavy, I guess, objectively, but relative to a lot of knives that are coming in lightweight, this one feels surprisingly hefty. I think it's because of that lack of skeletonization. This isn't a big deal, but it's a thing, right? Next thing, the springs on this guy are a little bit stronger, it feels like, than on some of your other Axis-style locks out there in the world. As a result, it definitely takes a little bit more doing to open this guy up, to pull this back out, and it presses a little bit harder against that. So that's something to consider. Next thing, remember I talked about this patch here for the clip, making it easier to get this in and out of your pocket? Well, lefties don't have that. I get it. Aesthetically speaking, that would kind of look like it wouldn't look like a beautiful thing. And so for 10% of the population, yeah, I can kind of see why they made the decision they did. But what this does mean is that if you are a lefty, you're probably going to end up wanting to sand down a little portion of this texture underneath there, and you're going to end up with this pad in the middle of the knife on the right side. Yeah, on the right side of the knife. But, that is the only area in which this is not fully ambi. I'm certainly nitpicking here. And then finally, on the bad side, there is a very hard bump at the close. What I mean by that is, watch this. As I'm opening the knife here, I pull the sliding bar style lock. Why not? It's not. But anyways, I pull that back, and what we see here is, watch the position of this lock. As I'm closing, about the same position. And then suddenly, as I approach the end, you're going to see this guy shift back in this direction. And there's actually a fair amount of force required to go this last little bit before it comes sliding shut. There feels like there's almost a little bit of a nubbin at the very end of that circular, that arc, basically, which means that this has a lot more force required to close it at the very edge there. The problem with this is that it very often, I've found myself, especially if I'm just trying to kind of drop it shut, I won't pull this back far enough in order to get that drop shut action, and it'll kind of hang right here. And similarly, as I'm shutting it, that doesn't always work. I just don't like that last little bit of geometry there at the end. I feel like that little bit of extra bump doesn't help me at all. And so I think I would appreciate it if they did that little bit differently. So to me, all of that is the bad, is that it's got that little extra bump at the close there. The clip texture removal is for right-handed folks only. The springs are a little on the stronger side. It is a little on the heavier side relative to a lot of your other plasticky handle knives. Maybe that's what's getting to me about it. It is a bit on the heavy side, and there is some roughness at the scale breakout, and it is not a particularly unique-looking knife. Pardon me. Wow. On the ugly front, there is unfortunately one ugly issue here, and that is that the sharpening was a bit of a letdown. If we take a look here at the tip, let me zoom in on the tip a little bit for you. what we see here is that, yeah, this was not symmetrically sharpened at all. We see here that the tip angle is very different on this side relative to this side, and in fact, the blade is different on this side relative to this side in terms of the angle, and there's even a little tiny bit of a recurve in this area right here. It feels to me like this must have been a Friday at 5 o'clock sharpening kind of thing. Right? Is it the end of the world? No, and it also, by the way, caused a little bit of fading of the DLC along this edge right here, because it looks like they maybe started off at the wrong angle and then moved in. I don't know. Whatever it is, this is a knife that is actually pretty well made, all things considered, and then the sharpening kind of let it down a little bit. Right? It's a nitpick, but it is an ugly thing in that it's something that they very easily could fix, and I very much hope that they do fix that in the future. So to me, at least, that's what's ugly here, is that the sharpening kind of let this guy down a little bit with the asymmetrical tip, as well as the overall asymmetry and bit of recurvature due to the sharpening down there. Final conclusion, actually, I was very surprised by this knife in a couple of different ways, right? Because it's got a fine price for a USA-made piece, for being what it is. It's got a full ambidextrous construction, it's got full liners, so it's feeling pretty durable, good texture work, a nice interesting pivot mechanism / integral washer thing, whatever you want to call that, a nice blade, some nice customization, and a very strong feeling of effort, which I think Gerber really needs more, especially if they want to build their Made in the USA brand. This is the kind of thing you do to do that, and I appreciate that very much. It is not the most unique looking knife ever. It's got a couple of little details. It's a little on the heavier side relative to a lot of your other plasticky handled knives. It's got a very strong spring action, a righty focused texturing choice, a weird bump at the close there, and a sharpening job that shows a lot less effort than the rest of the knife does. My conclusion here is actually a little bit tricky, right? It kind of depends on the comparison. If you just look at this as a piece of metal, as just a knife from anywhere, the knife is someplace between good and pretty damn good, right? There is a lot to love about this knife. I think it is profoundly well done. And with a little bit more polish in a couple of those areas, this could be really excellent. And the configurability is definitely a win. But the thing is, relative to a lot of what else is out there in the world, especially if you're willing to look at overseas brands, this doesn't necessarily deliver the same kind of value you're going to see there, and so it's not going to shine. Where I think this is going to be more interesting is for the commenters and the people in the world who feel like, you know what, they really would rather buy an American knife for whatever reason. Again, that's your own sociopolitical statement. You're welcome to make it. If that's something that matters, this is going to be a lot more interesting because it is a nice tool. It's a very nice knife here. It's offering a pretty reasonable price, and it's offering some very nice features, right? It's a good feature set. It's a nice piece. There is a lot to love about this knife, and there really aren't that many really nice knives in the $100 range made in the States here. So I think that's going to be a much more important factor for a number of people, and that's probably going to be the thing that puts this in more pockets than anything. So I guess my final conclusion here is I am impressed. Gerber, keep this up. Keep doing stuff like this and not like the highbrow, and you're going to have a lot more people's attention. This is a way for Gerber to come back, and you all know I'm cheering for him. I'm not going to let him off the hook, but I'm cheering for him, right? And so, as I think we all should be, right? More great makers is a good thing. But at the same time, this is going to be a nice choice for a number of people. It's going to be a pretty good, solid choice, especially if you're looking for Made in the States. And I think, generally speaking, yeah, nice. So there you go. That's my final conclusion is, yeah, nice. Keep it up. So there you go. Have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.